Hello, Global Village. No, it's Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. It's December 8th, 2021. We want to thank Rob Grant for his amazing podcast. I'm probably wrong about everything. In a car in Canada. Thank you, Rob.
That's right. People who are wrong about everything in cars by now.
And it is an honor and a pleasure to be here with R. Bruce Elder. Is that the correct way to pronounce it?
Yes, thank you.
And you're calling in from where?
Toronto.
And you want me to call you Bruce?
Yes.
That's fine.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. It is an honor and a pleasure, man. I am truly honored. After listening to your master class on YouTube, I was like, holy moly. Okay, so first question is, what's the best thing for a human being?
The best thing for a human being? Was that the question?
That's
yes.
the question. Yep.
Okay. I think to live a life with some relationship to value, to truth, to serving other people, to trying to bring some good into the world. These are all platitudes, but I do absolutely believe them.
Dude, that's beautiful. And let me just keep you tuned. It's all about your hunch, your guess, and what you did at the beginning, Bruce, is fine. If you need to think and settle in, there's no rush here. So the next question is, what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Oh, far and away, reading. Reading really brings us. I'm sorry?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Reading really brings us into some relationship to a self that I still prize. Something. It brings us to focus. It prolongs attention, and in doing so, brings us to commune with deep levels of ourself. These, of course, are this notion of the self is related to the book and to reading, to silent reading. It is exactly the Gutenberg galaxy that we are entering into when we speak this way. And of course, much of my work now is concerned with a transition, with leaving that era in which the book was the main way of imparting information, in which long, slow deliberation was encouraged, in which attention was encouraged for another forma mentis. And I am, of course, trying to. Sorry?
Let's hold there because it'll come full circle and you'll be able to suss this out. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Mostly it is for survival. And I think that's a factor that is overlooked too much, that our brains are also, yes, they are formed differently at different times, but throughout history, they are organs of survival. All of our senses are, in the first place, organs of survival. And the art's relationship to that is rather interesting. We pride ourselves, those of us who are interested in the arts, in developing the senses to make very, very fine discriminations. We prize ourselves in being able to look at a painting in which, let's say, the colors are compressed toward black, in which they are a deep purple, a deep brown, a deep black, all adjacent to one another. And we pride ourselves in the capacity to discriminate these subtle variations in tone, and we marvel at the painter's ability to do that. Nonetheless, what we do, what our eyes were originally for, was to tell us where the tiger is and help us to avoid him and run the other way. They are really organs of survival, and the arts take and develop the kinds of our sensory capacities in really unusual ways.
That was beautiful. We're going to get into the arts. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented? Now, a couple of these questions, I go more. I know it's both and it depends, but your hunch, is it more innate or more invented to collect information?
I do think that the drive to learn, to explore, to acquire information, if you want to put it that way, is something that is unique, that is inborn, that it is innate. It is absolutely remarkable, those of us who have watched children develop, how from a very, very early age they want to explore. They want to taste what things are, and will put almost anything in their mouth in order to learn that the sensation that object causes in their mouth. And it goes on from there. To watch a child struggling to learn to balance so that they can, well, first of all crawl, and then later to stand up and walk. It is extraordinary to watch their the development of their curiosity and the desire to know. Humans by nature, I am certain, desire to know.
Yes, I appreciate your articulateness, and Bruce, you're really fun too. So the next question is, do thoughts create emotions?
I think that the distinction between thoughts and emotions is a very fuzzy one. We tend to make it all too sharp in our ordinary folk psychology, if you will, and to think of, and we conceive of thinking as something very abstract, dispassionate, and so on. First of all, thinking itself is a passion, and the ideas that we have also fuel emotions. I can think of the abstract idea of, let's say, motherhood, and waves of feelings will follow on thinking about abstractly the nature of motherhood, and how mothers will sacrifice themselves for their children, will endure hardships, in order to support their children. I think about this abstractly, and waves of feeling follow from it. And I think that's the ordinary sort of relationship between thought and feeling. I can think about the hard work and effort and focus and hardship that many of the artists that I have had the privilege of knowing over my life face. And to do the work that they believe has been given to them to do. And I feel such a combination of admiration, sadness. I recognize their nobility, and that will too brings waves of emotions over me. This idea that thinking and emotion are really separated is, I think, a folly.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bruce, because we can't separate feeling from thinking, but we've invented the word, so we think we can. The next question is, I don't know what I think until I fill in the blank.
Until I express the feeling or thought.
Good. Can humans think without language?
I think that that's a very difficult question. And by and large, I think that we have certain drives before we acquire language. Drives to feed, drives to get sustenance in us. But I don't think we really have anything that we would recognize as emotions or thoughts before we acquire language. And in support of that position, I would also say that one of the ways that we try and sort out derangements in feeling, if you will, or to undergo kinds of therapy, talk therapy, if you will, in which we learn to name and describe the feelings that we are having, and to discriminate between rage and jealousy and upset and fury and feeling jilted or insulted. We learn the language of emotions, if you will, words that refer to emotions, to help us discriminate between them and to recognize the nature of the emotion better.
Wow, you anticipated the next question, Bruce. Thank you. Chomsky said that language is not just words, it's culture, it's tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work?
That's a fascinating question too, and of course it is a question that preoccupied writers, artists at the turn of the 20th century. That sense that language doesn't fit the world anymore became a really prevalent feeling. Many artists expressed it. It was something that was frequently said in the wake of the of the First World War. That sense that language has lost its grip on reality. My own view of what was involved in this, and I think that this is typical, that the sense that language doesn't fit reality occurs at times when our new technologies have come forth. And out of these new technologies, new conceptions of the world are emerging. In the case of the artists at the turn of the century, this was the development of the rise to prominence of the science of electromechanics, and a new sense of reality, which is flow, change, process, the idea that reality is made up of objects that are enduring and unchanging, simply located. They are there in that area of space that they occupy and nowhere else. That sense of reality was being displaced by ideas of process. The world is, the cosmos is made up of energy that flows. Energy isn't simply located. Every energy has vibrates, and its vibration courses through the entirety of the cosmos. A new conception of reality was emerging, and we didn't have the old language that we used to describe reality no longer seemed to fit the new conceptions, new ideation that was emerging. And I think this became a prominent feature in the arts of the early 20th century and among painters.
Right. That was good, because we're jumping right to 1950. These are two questions by Alan Turing. Is thinking a function of the soul?
I'm actually not sure whether I believe in the soul, except as I will certainly use the term metaphorically. I'm not sure that we can consider the soul as something independent of the body, as separate from the body. And
that's good. Let's move on. His second question was, can machines think?
Can machines think? I think that in some sense we are thinking machines, but we don't understand how it is that this flesh that we are and the things that go on in the flesh produce experiences that we call conscious experience. That's really the hard problem of consciousness, if you will, to use Chalmers' word.
Again, you got ESP, dude. You anticipated the next question. Perfect. You've sort of touched on this in your talk, but does the brain more detect consciousness or more create consciousness? I know it's both, and it depends, but what's your hunch? Is consciousness there bubbling away and we're detecting it, or are we creating it?
My sense of that, again, I think that's a slippery question, because I'm quite certain that every conscious experience that we have is correlated with changes in brain activity, the electrical circuits in the brains, and things going on in the brain's electrical circuits, and so on. But here's a complexity that arises. Let's say that we think of, we draw a comparison between a old cathode ray tube and the image that we see. We watch a television and we look in and we're watching Law and Order and watching the lawyer, the prosecuting attorney, arguing his case, or we see the policeman going out and interviewing people. Okay, so we have the sense that we're looking into the tube and seeing a world. We know that world that we are seeing is correlated with waves that come in through, course through the atmosphere, came in through antenna, now through cables, and are guided to the cathode ray tube, and this causes the electrons to course across the screen and change the phosphors on the screen. What's the relationship between those waves that come in, course through the atmosphere, come in through the antenna in the old days down to the cathode ray tube, and guide those electric particles, and our experience of seeing the lawyer in the courtroom arguing the case? We really we can't say that what we're really seeing when we look at the case are the we don't have any understanding of the relationship between that image that we have of what's going on in the world and its electronic underpinnings. And I think it's very much the same with the relationship between the electrical activities in our brain and the experience that we have. I'm looking at a man now with glasses and white hair. There are dice, large dice above his head to the left, etc.
Yeah.
What the relationship between those two are is really mysterious, and I think finally unfathomable.
Yeah, Bruce, beautiful, because those are fuzzy dice from the Frank Zappa world, and he said it well. He talked about waves and particles, and he blended, and he called it wavicles.
Yes, good.
So I know you're into poetry, and we're going to get deeper into that. But Audre Lorde, the great poet, said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer responded, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
I'm not sure what we mean by saying exposing the master's house. Can you elaborate?
Yes, that's good. You're asking me a question. Basically, I open a lot of my questions with cute quotes by McLuhan or Ezra Pound or these people. You don't have to put the quote into the question. It's your choice. You put it in the context you want. So Audre Lorde was basically saying, you can't dismantle the master's house. So whatever you want to interpret her saying that with the master's tools, Yvonne Rainer says, no, you got to expose the tools. So the basic question is, leave this quotes aside. What new tool do you suggest in general, or apply the quotes? Either way.
Okay. Let's take it that as if I try and think about this question, I'm once again brought back to this change that I argued in the art world, but not just in the art world. It was also something that we began to it was a much larger change in the conception of the cosmos, the conception of humans' relationship to nature, the idea of the deity of the good, etc., of the nature of human being, the nature of sexuality, of love, etc. Huge change in the very fundamentals of how we in our conception of reality. And I think that the idea of, I think that there is something basically right about what Rayner was proposing, but I would say that a great deal of, if we're thinking about deconstructing the tradition that was handed down to us, and about if we're asked, as you have asked me, about the tools that we use to in our effort to challenge, deconstruct that tradition. What we are largely involved with at present is the showing how the tradition that was handed down to us came out of a relationship between humans and nature, in which humans were all seen as almost outside of nature, and that nature was there for something for them to use and to control, to shape for their purposes. That it wasn't that the relationship between humans and nature wasn't seen to be a participatory relationship. It was humans control nature. And I think that and that has led to all kinds of mischief. It results in the ecological disasters that we have been facing. Look, after this last summer, it was very clear, very long before this, but after this last summer, with wildfires raging through California, through Western Canada, in Greece, in Portugal, floods in China, we could just go on and on and on. That this conception of humans' relationship to nature has been a disaster, and we have to replace this with a different conception in which humans and nature are intimately involved in each other. We understand ourselves as belonging to nature, and we should care for nature's needs for survival.
Really, really well put. And McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions so we can learn to cope with what we don't like about them. So Marshall's, one of his main probes is why, and this is the question to you, Bruce, why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
McLuhan makes this statement at a time when when McLuhan made this statement, he was also drawing our attention to what I've referred to as the new forma mentis that is emerging, the new way of thinking. And he argues that that is going to, those changes are going to disarray and trouble our sensorium, our nervous system, our way of relating to the world. He spoke of the responsibility of media studies, if you will, as that of preparing the humans, the human nervous system for the blows that it is going to be subjected to by the new communications technologies. I think he is absolutely right about that. But why is it that we aren't, and that he suggests, as you know, that artists are actually, they don't foresee the future. They are the people who are living in the present and are able to see what is going on. Other humans live exploring reality through a rear view mirror. They're looking at the past, what's gone by. And the artists alone are recognizing what is occurring in the present. I think that analysis, that we have a preference, if you will, handed down, that it created by what tradition hands down to us to see things in the way that previous generations did, that it's hard to break into the new, if you will. That's one, just a tendency to experience things as they have always been. A second is the terrific fear that the future, where we are headed, is going to be violent, disruptive, damaging to the psyche. And you have a little bit of that in my comment. How do I prefer to acquire information? Through reading. Yes, that's the old world. Where we are headed in instantaneous communications, etc. That's a little bit frightening to think about.
You really nailed that one, Bruce. Thank you. And Martha Graham said, great artists aren't ahead of their times. They are their times.
Exactly.
But let's go into your background a little. What can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
My earliest memory is moving when I think when I might have been 2.5, maybe 3 years old, and we were moving from a town 300 kilometers east of Toronto, Kingston, to Toronto. My father had gotten a job in Toronto, and my mother took us on the train from Kingston to Toronto.
Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
I think we have to develop into a state in which we cherish memory. But there is something very troubling about humans' memory. It really does seem to me that we tend to remember the slings and arrows that we have been subjected to, the nasty things that people do to us. It's interesting. I've been turning over my papers and to an archive, and I've been putting going through my filing cabinets and moving these materials out of my filing cabinets and into filing folders, putting them in boxes, shipping them off to the archives. And I have to admit that I have allowed myself to fail in that way. I go through and see a letter from someone and think, I don't remember this. A letter that said something so nice, a letter that was so kind and so generous, or invitations that I've received by people who were and they have completely gone out of my memory. But I'll remember the time a colleague confronted me in a hallway or something like that, and something unpleasant went on.
Don't worry, Bruce, because McLuhan's mentor, and I also got from your masterclass video, which again, I compliment you, it's very thorough, is McLuhan said, I'm applied Joyce, and Joyce said, I'm applied Aquinas. So he carried on this transforming theme you have of what your influences.
Yes.
The anxiety of influence, Harold Bloom. But look, Joyce said the key line: remember to forget.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're just briefly now, your early role model within your immediate family and then outside your immediate family, just briefly, someone who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
In my family, you're asking first?
First immediate family and then outside your immediate family, just briefly.
Okay. Well, my mother was very...
What did you get from your mom?
My mother was a really, truly loving person. Even when I was older, I'd watch her with children, and she really did love children and raising them and so on. I don't know exactly what difficulties I had when I was young, but even in my early years of public school, I wasn't able to make myself understood through speaking. I had some kind of speech impediment, and possibly something close to autistic spectrum disorder. And I absolutely did not want to go to public school. I spent much of my time in the early grades crying. I couldn't, and as I say, I couldn't make myself understood what to at all. But I think a part of that too was I just didn't want to leave mommy.
Mom,
wow, didn't invest around it in this envelope of love, and who accepted my disabilities, if you will, and the idea of going out to school and being mocked by children who, for my incapacity to make myself understood as I spoke. I can remember my father, who was a language teacher. He taught French, German, and Latin. Discovered when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, discovered some new books just recently published, books by Dr. Seuss. And he got the idea that if he could sit with me and have me read these books out loud, because of the sounds, the repetition of the sounds and the rhymes, that I might be able to learn how to articulate the the basic sounds of the English language. And I got so upset at that. You want me to be reading these children's books? They're for 3 and 4 year olds. They're not for 8-year-olds.
Wow.
But no, that was my early and at the same time, my brother, my older brother, was extremely important to me. I think we were also an extremely poor family. And I mean, we lived in a room above a gas station, and the sometimes heated by a coal fire, but very often we didn't have the money to even buy coal. My father told me, when I was young, and I was not a robust, strong baby, I was weak, and they couldn't afford to heat the place. I'd have frozen diapers in the overnight. And my father and my mother used to watch over me, of course. Some of this, a weak child, a very poor gastrointestinal system, etc. All kinds of trouble. Sleeping in unheated room. I might not get through the night. And my brother, I think, my brother was 5 years older than I, and saw my mother on this death watch, if you will. And he adopted that as his, the fundament of his relationship with me. And so for the rest of his life, he would fuss over me and fix my collar when it wasn't right, and try and just preen and just basically fussed over me. When I was in high school, this used to bother me so much to see my brother. Right. I grew up enough to realize a while back I was inducted into a pretty prestigious organization in Canada, the Royal Society. And when I went to the Royal Society, same thing happened when I won a Governor General's Award. My brother would see me before I would have to go up. He'd take me out of the line and make sure I was all adjusted properly, etc. It sounds like a
great big brother.
I had learned by this time to be very grateful. I thought when I was in high school, it troubled me so, but to think, my goodness, aren't I lucky to have a brother who...
Yeah, you appreciate him. But, we're not going to be able to get into experimental film, which is the main topic. I really want to get deep with you, but let's carry on. Did your parents try to be a little briefer? I know it's very emotional and you're doing great, but we want to keep it a little more concise or we won't be able to get through all the questions. Okay. Did your parents raise you a particular religion?
My mother and to a lesser extent, but my father too, were very churchy people, Presbyterian. My father was an elder of the Presbyterian church. My mother taught Sunday school, but I think her idea of what makes the church important, suffer the little children to come unto me and forbid them not. For she just wanted to be in the Sunday school and looking after the toddlers, as they were called at the church. And I think that that was her idea of what religion is. And but yes, they were very churchy people.
Do you pray?
Do I pray? Yes, but not in that form of petitioning to a guy with a gray beard in the heavens, but kind of contemplation, prolonged contemplation. That's something that I practice. Yes, I try and get time. I try and get time in the morning and the evening to sit and try and make contact with some sense of another order of being.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
I might say I actually don't believe that there will be any life after death, in the sense of that my soul will go to another place and be face to face with the deity. I will say what I hope people might say after I'm gone, and this is what I think of as the afterlife, was he really tried to do good.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
In my sober moods, I believe that yes, there are evil people. That is to say, people who have been shaped by experience to not resolve to try and follow a path of the good. But I must say, at times, it really does feel to me, I don't actually believe this, but it does feel to me like there's some evil demon up there that is in control and steering the world toward some sort of apocalypse. And I must say, watching what has happened in the United States in the previous 4 years really makes you think that that might actually be true, that there is some evil force that is using people to its end.
Very good. Well put. I agree. And how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And this one I'll set up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. A lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy?
I think the important thing is to not let them disarray you to the point that you can't try and pursue a good. And that is, of course, exactly what enemies try and, or evil people try and do with you. And that is to get you disarrayed, to scatter your thinking, to make you lose focus and intent. And you have to tell people, don't let that happen to you. Yes, you can be aware that it's going on. Yes, you can take measures in the real world to make sure to try and do what you can to assure that they're not thwarting what you need, but you can't let them disarray your thinking to the point that you lose focus and intent.
Beautiful, Bruce. I agree with you. And this next question is just sort of walk us through again briefly. What first attracted you to pursue philosophy, then poetry, then film? Like, what was the kickover point where you go, I can do that? Like, you're going to high school, then you're going to say, I'm going to pursue philosophy. What was the kickover, the turning point, the tipping point? Like, who or what caused you to go to philosophy, then to
Well,
poetry?
I'd love to say it was something very noble. I didn't go to university to study philosophy. I started out in pre-med. I was a science student in high school and went to university with the intention of studying science and then medicine. I was in a class of really pre-med students. They were called, it was at McMaster University. I also became very aware very quickly of how many doctors, and it's been borne out across life, are not didn't go into medicine in order to do something good. They went into medicine to make a lot of money. So there was that sort of thing that that was troubling me. But one day I cut class. A nice warm fall day, just before the cold set in, and I spent some time with a young woman. And she then said she was going to class, her philosophy class. And I decided to accompany her. And it was a class on Plato. And I shared her Plato text, the Edith Hamilton anthology, and listened to this. And I said, that is what I want to do with the rest of my life. I went over to that was in my second year, almost November, and I went over to transfer from science to philosophy. I'd like to say it was something high-minded, but it was following a girl into a class.
That's totally okay. But then were you already pursuing reading poetry, studying it, writing it?
Yes, I had been writing poetry like many adolescents from the time I was in high school, reading a great deal of poetry. I was in high school when I discovered a book by Kenneth Rexroth, who probably has been the thinker maker who has influenced me the most.
Let's stay on Kenneth and poetry for a second. What's the function of poetry?
The function of I think that poets are physicians of the soul. I'll use that term, even though I think of it as being only a metaphoric expression. They're physicians of the soul. They try and create harmony among our contending feelings and thoughts, to bring our being in alignment with the order of things, and create a kind of awe, and engender an experience of awe and wonder at the majesty of the order of things.
Beautiful. So well put. Very poetic, Bruce. And I'll tell you, right here in Venice, California, where I am, I worked in an art gallery that was the home of where Rex Roth used to read. It was called Venice West. And I was there
Yes.
when it was called Sponto Gallery. And Rex Roth is one of his answers is my favorite. The purpose of poetry, says Kenneth Rexroth, is to woo your lover and subvert the bourgeois.
Yes, I know that expression, and I think there's profound wisdom in that too.
Yeah. And
but of
so
course, that goes out of the sense of poetry as direct communication from one completed self to another. And I use that expression, a completed self, because it suggests a kind of the depths of one person communicating with the depths of another.
Yeah. And then Gary Snyder, you'll love this. Gary Snyder said, my task as a poet entails the work of seeing the world without language and then putting that seeing into language. Now, here's the one I want you to react to if you could. Leo Bersani's Mallarmé study, the symbolist Mallarmé.
Yes, yeah.
He said, the very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition. Any comments on that one?
Yes. Again, there is Mallarmé was one of those writers whom I referred to a few minutes ago, of the sense of language as losing its grip on reality, and of the experience of words at the verge of becoming meaningless. And so you think, and I do think that this is an aspect of it is what makes makers make, if you will, that sense of language as on the verge of becoming meaningless. And so to combat that, the opening of that abyss, if you will, to combat that, they try and invest language with meaning.
Yeah.
Meaning really they make. Good. And I do think that is very much the sense that makers make, if you will, and that is there's something that is indefinite, imprecise, not understood, something that is slipping away, something that is troubling in its indefiniteness, and you try and combat that with by making a thing. Yeah. With language, with electric particles or whatever.
Which is perfect lead-in. You got ESP, Bruce. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin over 100 years ago. He ran a movie theater called Volta Cinema.
That's right.
He basically allegedly said, why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. What was the next step that kicked you over to pursuing moving image art? Films. Were you going to see films in high school and going, I want to do that someday? Where was the kickover point to pursue cinema?
No, it's another experience, not unlike the experience with the young woman and the Plato class I mentioned. I I was not interested in pursuing filmmaking. I was publishing poetry. I was interested in poetry through my years at university. Of course, I belong to that generation that was completely infected by cinephilia. For us going and seeing, I mean, it was just de rigueur among everybody that I knew, that everybody that I hung with, to go and see the new Godard film, to go and see the new Fellini film, to go and see the new Michelangelo Antonioni film. Yes, that was something that we did, but it was not something that I imagined as a life course for me. It's a long story, but I couldn't. I don't want. I'm going to skip over it and say I learned that I wouldn't. That it would be highly unlikely for a person at my age, just the nature of the demographics, to get a teaching job in philosophy. So I thought, what am I going to do? Oh, well, maybe I can make instructional movies. So I went to Ryerson in order to learn how to make instructional movies. Yeah. And then Ryerson was changing at the time. There were not courses in film studies. In Canada at the time, there was one in Queens, one at McMaster, but you couldn't do degrees in film studies at the time. Ryerson was going to set up a 4-year, what they called a Bachelor of Applied Arts. It had been a vocational school, offered a 3-year diploma, and they were going to morph into offering 4-year diplomas. They knew that I had studied aesthetics and poetry and so on. I enrolled in the 4th year of the special studies there, and they asked me to stay and set up the courses in film studies.
Right. Hold on one second. You actually explained this all so well in your master class, so we'll refer people to watch that. You really.
I'll just say one thing, and that was Stan Brakhage showed his films.
Yeah, and then to fast forward, that was beautiful how you really got deep into Brakhage, which is where we're leading to get into so we have time to talk about experimental film. So that was good. I just wanted to know the kickover point, and you said it. A screenwriting teacher told me a great film is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. A great film is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process making films?
First, I try and avoid intention and imposed form. My idea of making is to put oneself in a circumstance and to try, and this relates to I told you, you asked me if I pray, and I said trying to settle and get in touch with something else through prolonged concentration. Try and get yourself, when making, into a similar state so that you are feeling energies from all around you and are maximally open to those energies in all their varieties and vicissitudes, and to respond to those energies coming in to oneself from the environment. Again, as I've said, I think we need to talk about humans having a participatory relationship with nature. And nature is in some sense the environment making the work, impelling me to move in certain directions.
No, that
it's
was
the
beautiful.
energy that drives me.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And also, Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your viewing audience when you're making your film?
Basically, not at all. Yeah. Although I do think that work grows out of a sense that if something moves me, if something draws me to try and make some sort of shape from what I am experiencing, if I do this and work at it and create a form from these energies, that other people, when they see the work or hear the work, will respond similarly. And that it's really my task to try and respond as accurately as I can to these wonders that invite me to work. And the work I consider as just really a gathering of these wonders. I made a film a little while ago called A Gathering of Crystals, and I think that's basically a kind of suggestion of what I'm thinking of film as this container of marvels. If I do my work well and capture their wonder and mystery, the gift of these concrete particulars, then others will be moved by them as well.
Super cool. I like the word mystery. Auden said that basically the mystery of art is that we don't know if it activates or pacifies us. Any comment?
Yeah, I know that that quotation, and I think it just captures the sense that I was referring to. With you asked what the purpose of poetry is.
Yeah.
And on one hand, it's capturing these wonders, Pounds collecting these luminous particulars, etc. That is very much what one does in making a film. But when they're all arranged in the appropriate order, they bring the soul into a kind of harmony with everything around us.
Yeah.
With the order of being, as I like to say, and that's pacifying, if you will. So it really is at once activating and pacifying. And I think that Auden really did capture that kind of dialectic in the process of making.
Yeah, it's a paradox because Breck said, I want art that activates, not puts you in a trance, but art that puts you in a trance could eventually lead to activating you. So it's a paradox. It's a dialectic. Peter Greenaway said cinema is much too rich a medium to be left to storytellers. Are experimental filmmakers telling stories a different way or doing something completely different? If me and you watch Tony Conrad's The Flicker right now, we're not necessarily seeing him tell us a story. It's just black and white flickers on and off for 15 minutes. But a story might go through our head. So I'm not dissing storytelling, even though cinema was hijacked by storytellers for the last about 120 years. All it is filmed plays. So are experimental filmmakers doing something completely different or telling stories a different way?
Well, obviously different filmmakers have different approaches and forge different sorts of forms. There are people who really are interested in storytelling. I tend, on the whole, to be less interested in their work than in filmmakers whose works tend to evolve more in the way that a piece of music evolves.
Yeah.
And good examples would be Harry Smith or Stan Brakhage. Now, I will say that working in a time-based medium, it's really difficult to avoid creating a form that seems to involve, first of all, a drive toward a certain outcome, to avoid teleology, if you will. The form wants to lead us to some kind of culminating experience, and then along the way there will be features that introduced into the form that seem to thwart that drive and need to be overcome. So even if you aren't telling a story with actors and people doing things, to avoid completely the story and drama seems really, really difficult. My own, I think the forms that I've evolved over the past couple of decades really do invite a sense of leading toward some culminating ecstatic motion. And that the film evolves by seeming to move toward that, and then you think it's going to emerge, and then the film will refuse that resolution, and that happens over and over again. It continually suggests resolution. And then refuses that resolution, goes through that cycle over and over until finally then it breaks into pure dynamism that invites a completely non-rational, ecstatic response, if you will. Is that a story?
Wow, you just answered Bruce, you nailed it. You just answered a question with a question. You win. That's what this is all about, inventing new questions. So George Manupelli started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years ago. That's like half of the history of the medium.
Yep.
And I asked Chick Strand told me she was starting Canyon Cinema the same time with Bruce Bailey. She said, we were trying to recreate our 11-cent movie-going experience, show a newsreel, a cartoon, and then an experimental film. Brakhage came along and says, don't show the other stuff, just show experimental films. If me and you and George were starting Ann Arbor Film Festival 60 years, would you lean more towards being inclusive or exclusive?
That really involves thinking about what the role of a festival director or a programmer, an exhibitor is. I know that in my writing, I tend to focus on pure cinema. I tend to be interested in the work of, to write on the work of Stan Brakhage and Harry Smith and so on. As a teacher, I really feel, and so as an exhibitor as well as when I have done programming, I really am much more eclectic. I think about I don't know if you've seen the Jonas Mekas' books the recently published 2-3 years ago collection of his diaries and notes, and he jottings on what he was going to see, newly arrived displaced person, if you will, to Williamsburg and then Manhattan, going and seeing everything, and then arranging shows too,
Yep.
putting on his own that were extremely eclectic. And I think if we think of the job as a teacher, a programmer, or whatever, to try and in revealing how the master's house was constructed, if you will, to go back to that question, in order to think about what the natures of cinema is and how films have been put together, we need to be really eclectic.
Yeah, it was beautiful because I know Jonas has praised you highly, and in the big picture, we want people to form an aesthetic on Norman McLaren, Betty
Yes.
Boop, Hitchcock, Jonas Mekas, Harry Smith, Bruce Conner, Maya Deren, and the whole system, not just, so it leads perfectly in the next film. Next question is, what are the services and disservices of marginalizing experimental film? Jackson Pollock was on the cover of Life magazine in 49. Regular people could start developing an aesthetic on experimental painting. There was no Bruce Conner and Maya Deren Life magazine covers. Generally, it's privileged, entitled, I call them rich art kids, who develop an avant-garde aesthetic and dominate the experimental film world. Any comment?
Yeah, I have a number. I could go on about that for much longer than you'd wish. In the first place, I absolutely find preposterous the idea of artists saying that they, calling their own work marginal work or fringe film, as is a very common term. I make fringe films. I absolutely do not believe that the work of Michael Snow, Harry Smith, Robert Breer, Stan Brakhage should be fringe cinema. In my view, it should be absolutely central to the experience of cinema. As a teacher, I have tried to do that. As a programmer, I have tried to insist that this is real cinema. This is true cinema. And I don't find that I have programmed for, just folks, presented at programmed films for large galleries and museums. I've taught students who came to study to learn how to make feature movies, etc. I have never had any trouble getting them to literally revere the imagination and complexity and richness and wonder of Robert Breer or Stan Brakhage or Hollis Frampton, Bruce Bailey. I just don't have, I never experienced problems of that sort. As for whether this is the work of an elite for an elite, sociologically, I'd have to say, oh, gee, it is. A lot of the people that I know making this sort of work are, they're born into wealthy families and have trust funds and this and that and the other. Nevertheless, that's put that sociological observation aside. I do the films that these people are making, Michael Snow, Robert Breer, and so on, how can you say this is the work of an elite when actually the production circumstances are very demotic?
No, you
This is
covered.
work. This is work that can. The reason that I stayed. I didn't intend to be a film teacher. That goes into the, that master class tells that story, but filmmaking was a little bit expensive when I started out, but it was something that a person of no substantial means could make.
Yeah.
They're demonic forms.
Yeah. Bruce, you answered it well, and I agree with you. Your beauty is you said, yes, this is an elite kind of entitled art form for rich kids, but it doesn't mean that I have to teach it that way and realize it that way, and it can be for everyone. I totally agree.
And the real makers that I've known, Michael Snow was not terrifically wealthy.
Right.
Bob Breer, he had to.
No, I know. I interviewed
put his
Phil
pennies
Solomon.
together. Bruce Bailey lived extremely frugally.
Right. I interviewed Phil Solomon with all these questions, and he goes, "I'm a professional experimental filmmaker." He says, "Yeah, like right. You get paid by Sundance to do a program, but you still have to teach to make a living. You can't make your you can't make your living being a poet or an experimental filmmaker. Thank God." So first of all, I have to ask you. We got 20 more. I mean, excuse me. I asked for 90 minutes. We have 10 more minutes. Can you go over? Can you do 20 or 30 more minutes, or you're done?
Yes.
Okay. So just so I know what to say. Okay. The next question is, what's more important, conviction or compromise? I know it both and it depends, but just your hunch overall, your philosophy.
Oh no, conviction and remaining absolutely true to it. The minute you begin saying, well, this will be good enough, will really, the minute you begin doing that, you're compromising your work. You have to be, you're compromising the work. The minute you begin to say, oh, this will be good enough to do it this way, you have to, you imagine something or you respond to something, and you have to do it just the way that the process requires. And to back off that one little bit, and especially if you begin to worry that, oh, what you are showing might give offense, what you are doing might trouble people, this business that we're all having to deal with nowadays of trigger warnings and all that sort of thing. Absolutely. This will be the death of art if we don't dispose of these tendencies very, very soon. No.
Do artists have a moral obligation?
Do they have a moral obligation? I think the moral obligation is to be true to the process. The process I was talking about, responding to the circumambient energies, etc. Remaining absolutely true to that, because that's what brings that us into the world.
Yeah.
I'm talking now of a kind of participatory sense of being, the
way you distinguish that and articulate it with nature and process is really clear. But it really leads to this question, which you've sort of already answered, but I'm going to ask it anyways. George Manupelli's mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas says there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So my question is art making more self-expression or more you're a vehicle or a vessel for whatever culture or technology is dominant? Now, I'm going to add the second part so we can get right down to it, because you've sort of already answered that. Your nature process answer. Can art making be egoless?
First of all, I think that it ought to be egoless, and that it ought to the idea of self-expression is pernicious. That idea of self-expression comes from that old way of, imposing on nature and imposing oneself and trying to create a form out of natural materials by imposing oneself on nature so that one sees himself or herself. Basically, this was a very masculinist conception of making, I think. So seeing himself embodied in the world, he's observing his own self-reflection, if you will. That just has led us to so many disasters. There are, I think, real paradoxes involved in this, however. One is that there is, I think, a real sense, and go back to what I was saying about my efforts to find time every day, to morning and evening, to contemplate that when you go deeper and deeper into yourself, then what you arrive at is something other than self. You come to a higher order, if you will, which you simply belong to. And so that goes back to, what are they expressing? A higher reality? Yes. So there is that kind of paradox, and that's an aspect of Brackage taught me that the first sessions that I attended, Brackage's classes in New England, that if you go deeply enough into yourself, then you end up at a zone that is utterly beyond the self, that is higher than the self. I also think in this sense of reality that emerged with the development of the science of electromagnetism and its rise to dominance. The artists began to feel, and I think there's real, it is, in my view, a very exciting idea that artists' work was being shaped by ideas that were coursing through the cosmos, energies that were coursing through the cosmos. So we saw, interestingly, in San Francisco, for example, the development of a kind of surrealist school. The artwork is Le jeu est une autre, Rimbaud said, and many of these surrealists embrace that idea. I am another.
What is that Rimbaud? What's the Rimbaud translate to?
I is another. Le jeu est une autre. Jeu est une autre.
Right.
I am another. And that sense that I am being operated from something outside of me. And you began to get, the poet Jack Spicer begins talking about his poems being conveyed to him by radio waves coming from Mars. You began to have people like Wallace Berman and the idea of art, the ideas for art being conveyed through waves through the ether. I think the science of electromagnetism reawakened. That was a very old idea of making, of course. The Greeks, the Greek poets before Plato suggested similar ideas of making. And even, the analogy of art making to the Aeolian harp, that their winds are blowing and it plays this instrument and creates music, that they are waves from beyond that are producing the music on the Aeolian harp. A notion again that Harry Smith revived. Anyhow.
Bruce, you're talking all my heroes, and Wallace Berman was right here in Venice, California doing
Yes,
that.
I do.
He ended up on the cover of the Beatles album, and people don't even
Yes,
know.
he did.
But what you do is something that Umberto Eco says, and I love this quote. We are dwarfs, but dwarfs who stand on the shoulders of giants, and small though we are, we sometimes manage to see farther on the horizon than they. Now, it's not an ego thing, but it's something to aspire to. That you've really said this, because you dropped these names of all my heroes. I didn't know this. I learned of you through the McLuhan world, and then all of a sudden I goes, well, I better look into this guy a little. And all of a sudden you're talking Ed Emschwiller and Shirley Clark, and I'm going, holy moly. And then I go to my Dante reading club today, and then I find out you make all these movies on Dante, and I'm like, this is what Marshall called complex clairvoyance.
Yes.
So let's move on. Is perception reality?
I don't think we have any way of understanding reality except through perception. I also, however, don't think that perception is a passive report. A percept is something that is made, that the mind forges it through complex processing that goes on at several levels. Moreover, I don't think that the processing is fixed. I think it changes through history. So our way of literally of seeing a tree is different than, let's say, an animist who might have believed in the world tree or something like that, and of the roots connecting the earth to the heavens, etc. I think that we of the 20th, first century, see a tree differently than such animists did, than people in the medieval era did. I think that people see human beings, see faces, see dogs, see fish, plants differently than we did. And literally, I mean by that they have learned different processing protocols, different procedures for bringing forth this percept. A percept is anything but a passive report.
You'll love this Marshall's joke. The little kid gets in the airplane with his dad, and he goes, "When do we get smaller?"
Exactly.
Okay, Tell me just briefly one major element of your creativeness that's changed and one major element that stayed the same in the decades you've been making films.
I'm afraid my answer is going to be rather dull, mundane, pedestrian.
Don't worry about that.
What I think the biggest change was that the switching from film, analog cinema, to video. And I wrote early on that I think that, yes, the indexical relationship between a filmic image and what it's an image of really shapes the nature of cinema. And to defy that indexical relationship, it was folly. Digital cinema is very different. And there, the interplay between form and imagination is shifted. Moreover, I am convinced that digital cinema is akin to poetry, oral poetry. And specifically, I think that that it is an oral medium before it is a visual medium. I don't think that of the old analog cinema, but I certainly think it is true of the digital cinema. You know, it invites a kind of immersive experience. Just the difference in the sound technology, if you will. I tried loading up my analog films with many layers of sound that would conflict with each other and had to be, you had to sort out each person in his or her own way. But the new technology allows film sound to come from everywhere. You know, very much McLuhan's notion of acoustic space, that idea that he embraced from Ted Carpenter. And I think that that's the kind of sound experience that digital cinema allows for and indeed invites. And that's going to bring the word and the acoustic envelope in, you know, that surrounds us. You know, it's as though we are enveloped in a sound space. That's what the digital cinema wants, and that's going to make oral aspects of this new medium primary, and I just love it. I wish I wish I were 20 years old and I had a lifetime of work in digital cinema in front of me.
News with that, you evoke the new sphere of Telia Chardin.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, the new sphere. Okay, now what's one thing that stayed the same? You said that's changed. What's one thing that stayed the same in your 40 years of being creative on film?
An effort to create a poetic cinema.
Okay,
as I mentioned, when I first saw Brakhage, I said, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. This is electric poetry. Yeah, and I've stuck to that all through.
Yeah, I always say Stan was a Gertrude Stein pound wannabe. That's what, he was. Okay, so Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength rather than we're taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
As I mentioned, language. I couldn't speak. I couldn't make myself understood.
Right.
And what I've spent my life doing is pursuing poetry.
Beautiful. Okay, Bruce, let's get through these few more quickies. Anger can be a productive emotion when
I actually reject that. I think anger is always dysfunctional.
very good.
I think it's our enemies disarraying us, if you will, and we cannot allow that.
I'll tell you briefly the history. I'm always trying to refine my questions. For 30 years, I said, can anger be a productive emotion? And they would simply go yes or no. And then my wife's dad, who taught at Dalhousie, a social worker, really great guy, he said, no, change it to can anger can be a production emotion when. So like 3 times in 30 years, people go, nope, it can't be a productive emotion. So I appreciate you found you reversed time and went back to the old way. How do you find peace of mind?
Trying to cultivate or fostering, not trying to cultivate, fostering gratitude.
Oh my God, that is beautiful. Can you forget to die?
Can I forget?
To die.
Forget to die?
Yeah.
My I don't know what to make of a question like that. I will say that one of the one of the reports that most touches me was hearing about the Canadian philosopher George Grant. He knew he was approaching the end of his life. He was ill. He knew that his time was limited. And saying to friends at the time that he just hoped that he might live to read the final volume of Heidegger's Kant study. There's a man who I think was, in some sense, forgetting to die.
There you go. That was good. Okay. You create what you resist. This is a phrase that I've heard. Like, I'm not saying you, Bruce, but one creates what one resists. Bob Goldthwait, the comedian, morphed it into you are what you hate. In fact, James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. Louis Buñuel nailed it. Thank God I'm an atheist. So how do you react to this, or any thoughts on you create what you resist? One creates what one resists. Any thoughts?
Well, the first response that comes to my mind in saying that is, once again, that that early experience I had of not being able to communicate, not being able to make myself understood, not being able to speak. And that troubled me enormously, and it certainly shaped everything that I've done.
Right, really well put. If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Don't be so troubled.
on what
things will work out.
Yes. Bruce, on what occasion do you lie?
Mostly, I might say I will try and avoid being drawn into a situation in which I have to state a falsehood. But sometimes it's, out of respect for people's feelings.
What's the most significant difference between women and men, physical aside?
I do believe, I know these views are unpopular now, that one is supposed to say that their emotional beings are identical. But I actually think that women are generally more other directed.
What's the word?
Other directed. They want to take care of other people, and
Other
and when you're talking to someone, they're trying to pay attention to what the others are feeling. They're looking in their eyes and trying to see how they're responding. They're other directed.
No, that was good. I like that. And what caused matriarchy?
What caused matriarchy?
Yeah.
I think matriarchy was the first social form. I think
what caused it?
The women banding together to look after one another and their families. So I think that's, it's basically looking after the hearth and the hearths of all these around me, and we have to create a society which affords that.
Beautiful. These are 5 questions that Alan Watts asked, just briefly in a few words. Right off the top of your head, who started it all?
I don't know that I believe that the universe has a beginning.
That's good. Good answer. Are we going to make it?
I am actually remarkably optimistic. I think you might know about my writings on McLuhan, that I think he was very torn, that there was an aspect of him, the analytical, scientific, thoughtful, intellectual aspect of him, that looked at the media and was really terrified by the potentials that he saw. But there was another aspect, and along with this, the destruction of literacy, et cetera, et cetera. But there was another part of him that he was a man of faith, and he could believe that history could not end in calamity, that God, I refer to it as the order of things, would not allow this, that the media must be a dispensation given to us to strengthen and enrich us. That shapes my outlook on life, actually. The order of being will take care of us.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, I look around what's happening with the environment and I am terrified.
Yeah, Bruce, that was a lot more than 3 to 5 words, but since you're such a great McLuhan person, I let you go on and on. Here's
sorry.
3 more Alan Watts. Don't be sorry. I love it. You're amazing. 3 more Alan Watts questions, just briefly. Where do we put it?
In our hearts.
Oh, who's cleaning it up?
Those who care.
Is it serious?
Can it be Serious with levity? I think so.
Yeah, I like that. You asked a question, you answered a question with the question, and then you answered your own question. That's great. Okay, just a few more here, Bruce. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
At the front, over.
Why?
Easier to tear.
If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what title would it be?
Gratitude?
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Oh, I hope it would be the resin of a evergreen.
They want to have a color other than black ink for a few pages. What color?
Blue.
If a statue was built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
Oh, I'd never want a statue. Vanity, vanity.
Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
A dog?
Okay,
They terrify me, but I know that.
Look at a dog is good. You never had it and you never want it. That's a good answer. Okay, just a few more. If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Try and put my mind somewhere else.
I've never had that answer. That is a great answer. But you'll love this. I asked this girl on the boardwalk in Venice once that question, and she goes, I'd take the velocity of the bag of shit and I would use it to swoop myself out of the vat of vomit. I go, that's the descent into the maelstrom.
That's it exactly. I was going to say.
Yeah, that's Edgar Allan Poe in the first. I go, you don't have to read McLuhan. Just read the introduction to his first book. He says it all in like the first 3 paragraphs. What's the healthiest cultural shift you see developing today?
I think that we can see in the art world and beyond the development of a kind of feminist eco-poetics.
Wow, that is good. Let's leave it there. Feminist eco-poet. Okay, I got like 3 more. I'm going to give you this bonus question I never ask people because it involves Stan Brakhage. I think you'll appreciate it. But first, Joseph Beuys, you probably know that artist. You know Joseph
Yes.
Beuys?
Yes.
He said, make the secrets productive. Lou Welsh, beat poet and ad man,
Yes.
said, guard the secrets, constantly reveal them. But it was Thornton Wilder, 1928. Art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. Bruce, you laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes, more than 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't answered this. What's it really all about for you?
The desire to be loved.
Oh my God, that is beautiful. Do you know the desire to be loved? Do you know the first hippie ever? His name's Eden Abez. He wrote.
Oh yes, Nature Boy.
He wrote Nature Boy, and he says the whole
That's
thing
right.
is to love and be loved.
Yes.
That's it. Couldn't put it better. Okay, he was homeless in Venice Beach. Can you believe that? I said, you better be careful in who you kick out of being homeless. They might write the greatest love song ever.
You know, Freud's expression, speaking of the need to make art, and it's always driven by a kind of sense of insufficiency and of and that an artist who is successful achieves through the imagination what he formerly had only in the imagination. Wealth, honor, fame, he says, and the love of women.
Wow.
Back to that Rex Roth comment, if you will. Yes.
Wow, we've gone full circle a lot. It's like the snake eating its tail. It's
yes,
like,
the Ouroboros. Yes.
It's like I ask people, is human progress cyclical or cumulative? Are we going in circles, or are we getting better or worse? And the answer is it's a cone. It goes.
Yeah, no, I've actually said spiral form. Yes, it's turning in circles in a gyre, if you will, but each revolution is a little bit higher than the previous.
Yeah.
And we will reach an omega point.
Well, I think we could go on and talk for hours and hours more, but just a couple more. Did you ever read Finnegan's Wake out loud with a group of people?
No, I have read parts of it with a group of people, and I have gone through it myself, reading it aloud, kind of a lonely sort of experience. But I told a lad just on Sunday, said, what advice would you give me reading Finnegan's Wake? And I said, you have to read it aloud. It makes no sense if you don't hear. And then I said, to go back to your comments about Ulysses, I think that literally Ulysses is a work that reflects the being of cinematic form. Finnegan's Wake is radio. And it's like being in a bar and you hear a sound coming. There's a radio up in the bar in the old days. Yeah. And then there's sound from another table and people coming in the door and talking to each other. There are all of these sounds mixing together. We're back in this acoustic space. And the portmanteau neologisms that he invents are the result of the interaction of these different sounds coming from different places. That's electromagnetic art as well.
Very good. That's like, there's a video online now you can watch Anthony Burgess explaining the Wake in a bar. But what you just explained was that's like Robert Altman films, the soundtrack. It's like three things going on. Could we just hear one? But did you know Eisenstein and Joyce were going to make a film together?
Yes.
Yeah, you knew that. You know everything. Okay.
No, but
so you know a lot. I mean,
I do like Eisenstein's work very much.
Yeah. Okay. How about this? Introducing Tarkovsky to an audience at the 1983 Telluride Film Festival, Stan Brakhage declared, I personally think the three greatest tasks for film in the 20th century are: 1, to make the epic, that is to tell the tale of the tribes of the world. 2, to keep it personal, because only in the eccentricities of our personal lives do we have any chance at the truth. 3, to do the dream work, that is to illuminate the borders of the unconscious. What are your 21st and 22nd century updates?
Let me say that I absolutely agree with Brackage on that. It's a quotation that I know. There's also a backstory, but I can't get into that right now, of difficulties that he had when he finally tried to show some films of his to Tarkovsky. At any rate, and I think you know that I was very, very lucky, very fortunate that Stan took an interest in my Book of All the Dead.
Yeah.
And I think that he saw something similar in that. And they are what I believe the task of the artist to be.
Yeah.
It's another way of. That was why the Book of All the Dead, it really was telling the tales of the tribe.
Yeah.
The epic that tells the tales of the tribe. And that's what I think Ezra Pound did.
Yeah. You mean your film series called Book of the Dead?
Yeah, the Book of All the Dead. Yeah.
Yeah, Book of All the Dead. Yeah. Okay,
based
Bruce.
partly on Dante, which also is an epic telling the tales of the tribe. In one sense, it is also a dream work. Those are both rather inaccurate statements, but there's a fringe of truth to them.
Yeah. But your success at being accomplished, you rate these three elements: luck, skill, and ambition. What played the biggest role, second and third?
Don't know. Luck certainly is important. Ambition is not. Skill, I have tried to acquire finger skills, and I talk quite a bit about the real trouble I'm having with the new aesthetics of de-skilling.
Yeah.
I do think that filmmaking is a very physical activity akin to dance. Brackage talked about that, and I absolutely believe it. And yeah, just learning the moves, if you will, to dance, to let the energies come in and then guide you in literally your physical movements in shooting, in making, and in editing. That's I have great belief in that.
Bruce, I'm going to ask you one more after this. Let's try a tetrad. Not a lot of words, short. What does experimental film enhance?
Romantic poetry.
Good. What does it render obsolete?
I think the commercial music, if you will.
Oh, that's good. Commercial music. What does it retrieve?
The spirit of the epic poets of Greece or Yugoslavia, if you believe the singer of tales, and I do.
What does it become? What could it become when pressed to an extreme?
Exactly what we were talking, the epic of the tales of the tribe. And that's why it's retrieving, the long songs of the singers of tales.
This could go on forever, and I sure hope it does. Bruce, it's been an honor and a pleasure. I sure learned a lot, and I'm truly enlightened. The last question is, what gives you the most optimism?
Watching young people coming to school, film school, art school, whatever, and falling deeply in love with dance or with painting or with film, and committing themselves to it. They know it's going to be a life that's tough, that they're going to be wanting for money all of their lives, etc. But they just fall in love with the activity. It really moves me so deeply.
Yeah. So the amazing thing is my first question is, what's the best thing for a human being? I got that from a woman who studied with Wilhelm Reich. She says, people. That's the best thing for a human being, other people.
Yes.
And then it goes full circle. The last question is, what gives you the most optimism? I got that from the last question they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. He says, other people. So,
terrific.
Like he spent his life cutting down people, but he needed people.
Yep.
The answer I get the most is, what gives you the most optimism? And people say youth. So it's really beautiful. We have this consistency going.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed it.
It's really cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's the button to end the world, but we're not going to end. It's going to go on forever.